Hi, in this video, we'll take a look at the following example. Solve the equation by completing the square. Notice this equation involves fractions. Let's take a look. First thing we want to do before starting the process of completing the square is making sure that the coefficient of x squared is 1. If it's not 1, it means we just have to do additional steps. In this case, there's nothing in front of x squared, which means it is 1. The other thing we want to check is that the constant is on the other side. In our case, the constant here is 1 over 4. It's on the right-hand side. If it's on the left-hand side, all you have to do is move it to the right-hand side. Now, what do we need to do in order to complete the square? First, we want to find b over 2 squared. b is coefficient of x, meaning the number in front of x. So in our case, negative 3 over 4. That is our b, the number in front of x, negative 3 over 4. We always divide it by 2 and then square it. So take b, divide it by 2, and then square it. So here we have our b is negative 3 over 4. We divide it by 2, and then we square it. Notice that 2, we can write it as 2 over 1. 2 divided by 1 is 2. What we want to do is simplify this, whatever is inside the parentheses. And how we do that? We'll use the keep, change, flip method, which says keep the first fraction as is. So keep negative 3 over 4 as is. Change the division to multiplication. And flip the second fraction. So 2 over 1, flip it. It looks like this. We're keeping negative 3 over 4 as is, changing division to multiplication, and then flipping this fraction. So we get 1 over 2. Obviously, we need to square this, but before we do that, let's simplify this. How do we multiply these together? We'll take 3 and multiply by 1, take 4 and multiply by 2, and let's not forget about the negative. So we get negative 3 over 8. 3 times 1 is 3. 4 times 2 is 8. Let's not forget about the negative. So we get negative 3 over 8, and then we need to square it. But before we do that, let's take a look at negative 3 over 8. Negative 3 over 8 is our b over 2. If you look here, we have b over 2 and then we square it. So this is our b over 2 and then we square it. Why do we care about b over 2? Well, it will come in handy later on in this example. So what I'm going to do is write that b over 2 is equal to negative 3 over 8, and then we'll come back to this later. Let's continue with simplifying this. Negative 3 over 8 squared means negative 3 over 8 times negative 3 over 8. And now to simplify this, we'll take 3, multiply by 3, 8 times 8, negative times negative is positive. So we get 9 over 64, positive 9 over 64. 3 times 3 is 9. 8 times 8 is 64. Negative times negative is positive. Now, what do we do with that 9 over 64? I'm going to rewrite the equation from the first line. X squared minus 3 over 4x equals 1 over 4. Except that we're going to leave space here. So plus a number on the left-hand side and plus a number on the right-hand side. And that's where we're going to put 9 over 64. Plus 9 over 64 on the left-hand side and plus 9 over 64 on the right-hand side. Whatever we do to the left-hand side, we must do the same to the right-hand side in order for the equality to hold. Now what we're going to do next is simplify the right-hand side. So in the next slide, all we're doing is simplifying the right-hand side. We're not going to touch the left-hand side at all. So for now, we're leaving left-hand side as is. We're not touching it. We're focusing on the right-hand side, how to add these two fractions together. In order to add two fractions together, they have to have common denominator. Right now, this one has a denominator of 4 and this one 64. So our common denominator is going to be 64. How do we change 4 into 64? We're going to multiply it by 16. But notice, we're multiplying the denominator by 16 and also the numerator. Because if you look at this one here, 16 divided by 16 is 1. So it's the same thing as multiplying by 1. It's not changing anything. The equality holds. So we're going to take 1 and multiply by 16 and then 4 times 16. So we get 16 over 64. 1 times 16 is 16. 4 times 16 is 64. Now that we have common denominator, we can add these together. So we add 16 and 9 over common denominator, which is 64. So 16 plus 9, that is 25 over 64. And this is how we simplify the right-hand side. I'm not touching the left-hand side yet. I'm just going to write it as is. So now that we simplify the right-hand side, now we can focus on the left-hand side. And that's going to be our next slide. This is our equation from previous line. Now let's focus on the left-hand side. We want to factor the left-hand side. How do we factor it? Well, completing the square rule is telling us we're going to factor it the following way. X plus b over 2 squared. Remember previously we wrote down that b over 2 is negative 3 over 8. We're going to use it here because we're going to factor it the following way. X plus b over 2 squared, which means x minus 3 over 8, and then we're going to square it. On the right hand side, we have 25 over 64. So again, we don't need to figure out how to factor it. All we have to do is follow the rule that says all you have to do is write b over 2 here, so x plus b over 2, and then square it. In our case, b over 2 is negative 3 over 8. So we have x minus 3 over 8 squared. Now we can proceed with solving for x. So here's our equation. In order to solve for x, we want to isolate x. And here we have a square. We want to get rid of this. And we can do that by taking the square root of both sides. Y square root. Since there is no number here, that means the number here is 2. So the index is 2. So this 2 will match this one. That way we'll just get x minus 3 over 8. On the right hand side, we have square root of 25 over 64 plus or minus in front. Why plus or minus? Well, let's take a look at a simple example. If we have x squared equals 25, that means that x equals 5 or x equals negative 5. 5 squared is 25, but negative 5 squared is also 25. So we need to accommodate for two solutions, so plus or minus on the right hand side. What do we get on the left hand side? X minus 3 over 8. We get this. On the right hand side, we have plus or minus. Because we have division here, we can split them into square root of 25 divided by square root of 64. We know that square root of 25 is 5 and square root of 64 is 8. So that's why we have plus or minus 5 over 8. Now this plus or minus here means we're going to have two equations. Here it is. We have one equation which is equal to 5 over 8, positive 5 over 8, and this one is equal to negative 5 over 8 because of the plus or minus. And all we have to do is move negative 3 over 8 to the right hand side. Same thing for this one. How do we move negative 3 to the right hand side? We add 3 over 8 on both sides. So we add 3 over 8 to the left hand side and to the right hand side. And when we do that, here we get 5 over 8 plus 3 over 8. We add these together. They have common denominator. That's 8 over 8, which simplifies to 1. Here we have negative 5 over 8 plus 3 over 8. Negative 5 plus 3, that's negative 2. So negative 2 over 8. And we can simplify this to negative 1 over 4 if we divide the numerator and the denominator by 2. We get 1 over 4. The answer is negative 1 over 4. So we have two answers, 1 and negative 1 over 4. Don't forget to subscribe for more.